I believe that we've been witnessing the hyperinflation. All that money, that hyperinflated money printing, the QE, went into stocks, it went into bonds, it went into real estate, and it went into derivatives.
Hey friends, before we get started with this extremely important interview with Lynette Zang, I just want to address the hysteria of the deep state and those on the left today, particularly the treasonous, treacherous demon known as John Brennan. Boy, you guys know John Brennan's role in this whole Russiagate thing. Our friend Harley Schlanger from LaRouche made it perfectly clear.
Brennan then sent teams over to work with the British. He and Clapper went to Comey, who's turning out to be a hapless half-wit. They went to Comey and said, you have to set up an investigation into this.
And today, the true traitor has come out and blasted President Trump's press conference and his meeting with Putin as nothing short of treasonous, saying that Trump's press performance in Helsinki rises and exceeds the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. You can't make this stuff up. You'll recall the DNC server, which should be at the crux of the Russiagate investigation and the hacked emails, was not given to the FBI by the DNC when the FBI requested it.
Two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying?
You also don't hear the fact that Kim Dotcom has evidence that he would provide under oath to Robert Mueller, proving that Seth Rich was the DNC leaker who provided the emails to WikiLeaks, not the Russians. But that didn't stop the CIA mockingbirds at CNN today, who were foaming at the mouth just like John Brennan.
Well, I'm shaking my head like everyone else you've spoken to in the last 30 minutes or so, because I've been here for 30 years. I came to Washington in the final months of the Reagan administration, and I have never seen an American president simply surrender to the leader of Russia. You should call this the Surrender Summit.
And just to give you the big picture, I was speaking to Harley Schlanger via email today about this situation, and I'll quote him. He said he thinks Trump and Putin were brilliant. They actually proposed a solution to investigate how both sides have committed crimes in interfering with elections. Raising the issue of Browder and the theft of Russian assets during the Yeltsin years was also excellent. Anderson Cooper, John King, etc. are showing their true colors, Harley says, and they are not red, white, and blue. There must be a sharp response to their treachery. And there will be, friends. I'm having Harley Schlanger back on this week to address this very important issue. The real traitors are the ones you see on TV bashing Trump. Friends, before we turn our attention to Lynette Zang, I just want to let you know Virtual Shield is one of the best VPNs in the world. They won't log your data or sell it like your internet provider probably does, so your privacy and anonymity is assured. It's the easiest, fastest, and safest VPN available, and it's extremely affordable. And Virtual Shield's IdentiSafe feature offers an additional layer of protection by preventing would-be hackers from accessing your computer camera or microphone. And yes, it even works on Windows. Take that, Bill Gates. And this month, if you buy an annual Virtual Shield protection program, you'll also get a free 1-year subscription to IdentiSafe. So check it out. I'll leave a link in the information section below this video. All right, friends, without further ado, let's turn our attention to Lynette Zang from ITM Trading. It's been far too long since we've had Lynette on. In fact, it's been 2 months since the last time we spoke with Lynette. And the last time we had Lynette on, we talked about the canary in the coal mine, which is the LIBOR, 170 trillion in question, on top of the incredible Mueller claim today that Trump is a traitor. I want to talk about the ridiculous Peter Strzok testimony, or lack thereof, this past week, allowing the Democrats to show their true colors. Lynette, welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be back. I didn't realize it'd been that long.
2 months, yeah, far too long. And you know how quickly things change. Yeah, well, you know what? These days, things change more quickly in a week than they did, 10 years ago. It would take, 2 months. So yeah. We have a lot to talk about. And I'll tell you who the enemies are that are trying to tear this country apart, Lynette. It's the Marxist Communist Democrats, the far, far, far left. Here's the good news. The miracle is many, many people on the left are now waking up with this hashtag walk away meme. People are fed up, even on the left, with this whole kill speech, End the First Amendment. If you don't agree with us, we want to go to war with you. The left is absolutely falling apart at the seams, Lynette.
Well, I would agree with that, but I also think that a lot of this is really about distraction and getting you to focus over here while they're doing something else over there. Because I believe it was the first central banker, Nathan Rothschild, that said, "I care not who makes the laws, let me make the money and I'll control everything." That is not an direct accurate quote, but it was in essence there. So I'm seeing a lot of distraction going on, and I'm wondering if it's not being used for another purpose.
Well, let's get into that too. Let's talk about the geopolitical situation. We can even talk about these trade wars. You know, Trump went to the G7 and kind of blew the place up. You know, he's not playing ball with Merkel. He's not playing ball with Rothschild puppet Macron. He is sort of walking to the beat of a different drummer, not necessarily this New World Order globalist drummer that we know the which Hillary Clinton certainly liked to play and would have played right through to the fruition of the destruction of our country. I have to play a very amusing quote for you. Now, keep in mind that it was Peter Strzok and Lisa Page who were busted with these, I think, 10,000 or more texts between each other. Many of these texts not only lamenting their passion for each other, but their passion of hatred for Donald Trump. Here's what Peter Strzok had to say about his political positions. This is quite amusing to me. Listen up.
And each and every one of those people in the FBI, whatever their political beliefs, walks in the door and they leave those behind. The FBI has a culture. It is in our culture. It is in our training. It is in our policy. And everything we do is dedicated to the pursuit of the facts where they lay and applying the law to those facts.
I'll pause it there. I find it quite amusing that he's trying to compel Trey Gowdy and others at the conference to believe that he wasn't biased and neither was Lisa Page, despite these texts between them during working hours about how much they hate President Trump. It's just stunning.
Well, it is. It is definitely stunning. And, he's right. There is a culture. There is a culture throughout, whether it's the FBI or the CIA or the any part of the political party. And so you say one thing and you do another. But if they say something, it's usually just the opposite. So by him saying that I'm neutral, that's not true. And then we have the proof of it.
Well, and we know from the Goldman Sachs transcripts of Hillary Clinton's speeches to the Goldman Sachs banksters, where she was paid $250,000 per speech for 3 speeches, that she said to them she has a public position and a private position. Right. And the two are different, which makes her a liar and a puppet of the elite banksters. So we know who the enemy of humanity is. And yet you hit the nail on the head early in the interview here by mentioning the Rothschilds, the controllers of the global central banks. So where would you like to begin? I know we could talk about trade wars. You have a lot to say about that. And then you have a bombshell, I think, for us about LIBOR. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, the LIBOR actually, it is a bombshell in the fact that by 2021, the LIBOR is simply a stated rate. It is not a market-based rate. Everybody admits it. And yet you have contracts, whether they're mortgages or credit cards or insurance contracts or any debt that the public takes out is tied to these, and the banks tell you what they are. It has no foundation in the market. So that's why it has to go away. Because even though, and really I had uncovered that it went back, and it probably went back earlier than this, but the earliest that I've seen those rates manipulated, JP Morgan admitted, were 2007. So that was actually even before the interbank lending froze, which was in 2008. So, but when that happened in 2008, it took a minute or two and then it was leaked and the public became aware of it in 2012. So we have between 2007, where admittedly it was being manipulated, to 2012, when they no longer could cover it up because it got leaked out, and therefore they had to say, oh, we're doing away with that because it's not market-based. The problem is that all of those contracts are written against them, and so all of those contracts, they either have to be, well, they call it amended, anything that matures after 2021, that contract has to be amended. Now, on the retail side, you know, if you have a mortgage or a car loan or a credit card, well, that language is in the contracts. The ISDA did a beautiful job in showing us exactly that. And I've done, you know, work on it. You can go to the YouTube and look at that on the LIBOR. However, they have to reset, restructure over 170 trillion contracts, and most of those are notional because they're derivative contracts. And in those cases, they have to get everybody to agree inside of this very complicated web. So essentially, and this could happen way before the end of 2021. I mean, you need to understand that, and I do want to talk about what's happening with the trade wars, but people have to understand that's just the drop dead deadline. Between now and then, they have to develop a new tool. Okay, central banks are working on that. Some have come out with them already. But then they have to develop an entire market to switch all of these contracts into. And in the derivative contracts, they have to get 100% agreement.
Well, let me jump in and ask you something here, because now in the pre-interview, I want to make this very current. You and I covered this in our last interview, and it's very, very important. But just to make this very present for our listeners and to convey the importance of this issue, in our pre-interview, I believe it was Megan there from your team who read a blurb from Bloomberg. Now, yes. Bloomberg is also reporting, this is fairly breaking news. Recently, Bloomberg has warned about this $170 trillion in question. Do you have that blurb? Can you guys read that again?
Yes, I can. Let me get to
Can you hear her?
Yeah.
Let me find a good quote from this.
Well, why don't you just read what one of our viewers that has been watching me for a long time, why don't you just read
that Lynette called it first on LIBOR. He saw it on Bloomberg today, encouraging everyone to get out before 2021, that there are $170 trillion that would be in question if not taken care of.
So, and the problem with that 170 trillion number, well, for one thing, it's far larger than the global GDP. That's all the money that flows throughout the global economic system. So, and, you know, everything is to perfection, but now they're starting to talk about it in mainstream TV.
Right, right.
I mean, that's really the point. I've been talking about it. You and I talked about it, you know, 2 months ago, and there were funny things that happened. It's paying attention to those patterns, whether it's a pattern of behavior or well, it is all a pattern of behavior, isn't it? But whether it's in graph form or verbally or how things are presented, I mean, that's what caught my attention. Been following LIBOR for a long time. But after it came out, it went almost dead silence on Main Street TV. And you just never heard anything about LIBOR, a little bit here and a little bit there, which of course I captured, but not very much. And that's what caught my attention, was a change in behavior this was Bloomberg, but on CNBC, when all of a sudden they started talking about LIBOR. And I said to myself, wow, something must be going on if they're starting to talk about it that heavily. And that's when I discovered the transitions that they were attempting to put in place, which really is a huge experiment. And you're looking for perfection. And there's no way that they can have perfection. So I'm thinking they need to, just like we were talking before about the distractions, they need to create distractions. And, you know, while, you know, I definitely do agree with President Trump that, and I've done work on this, you know, again, you can see it on the YouTube, where the trade agreements were very unfair, and they gave corporations, which are private, sovereignty over governments, and governments are supposed to represent you and me. Okay, so there definitely things had to change. And I'm not saying that he is part of this, because I think it goes much, much higher.
And by the way, when you mention that sovereignty of corporations over governments, you're not using puffery. That is what the TPP was all about. The TPP was going to make corporations sovereign, so much so that if one of the countries in the TPP did something to hurt the profits of any said corporation, the corporation could sue the country. So,
exactly.
I mean, that is the absolute end of the world in terms of freedom goes. So Donald Trump standing in opposition to the Paris Accords, to the TPP,
right.
And we can talk about this trade war. I mean, Jim Rickards is now saying first currency war, now trade war, is a shooting war next. I actually think that Trump is emboldening our nation and our people by being willing to take on the corruption.
We're like the piggy bank that everybody's robbing, and that ends. As an example, the European Union is brutal to the United States. They don't take, and they understand that. They know it. When I'm telling them, they're smiling at me. You know, it's like the gig is up. It's like the gig is up.
And to talk about the imbalance of trade, the unfair nature of these globalist trade agreements put in place by people like George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and then, of course, she was going to seal our fate and put the final nail in the coffin. This man is standing in opposition. Our president, thank God, like him or not, is standing in opposition to that final plan, that final 16-year plan to bury us alive.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. But when I was working on a recent piece, which was about the trade wars, what I saw, what occurred to me when I was really looking at it, is that this could be used by the central bankers to cover up the hyperinflation that's in our near future. Because one thing I can tell you for an absolute fact, every single time there is a currency reset and a change to a new financial system, one thing that's always there is a war. And it doesn't necessarily have to be this kind of boots on the ground war. Okay, the trade war is going to mean that everything's going to cost more money pretty rapidly, except that that's already been happening.
Right.
That's already been shifting. And so nobody's really talking about it, because what does inflation do? It inflates the profits at the corporations, because the inflation number is based upon the cost of the goods and the services that they charge. But we all know, and you can see that pretty clearly, that the general average wage never, ever, ever keeps pace with inflation.
Let me ask you something. I hate to interrupt, but I'm thinking about this. I just spoke with Bob Kudla from Trade Genius recently, and he made the point, and I think you'll probably agree, that the U.S. dollar is the one-eyed giant standing in a room of the blind. And he said the yen, the won, the pound, they're all going to go down first. The euro, they'll all go down first, and the dollar will be the last standing, and then it will hyperinflate when priced in gold. I think he made a great point, because where is all this hyperinflation that John Williams, the esteemed economist, somebody I really respect, he's been calling for hyperinflation. He said we were going to see its ugly head rear in 2016. We still haven't seen it, really.
Can we please back up on that?
Sure.
Because one thing I've learned in all these 63 years is that when you make an assumption and you have a certain perspective, that it makes a whole lot of sense to back up, change your angle so that you can see things just a little differently. Because when you do that, it's amazing what you see. And excuse me, but I believe that we've been witnessing the hyperinflation, all that money, that hyperinflated money printing, the QE, went into stocks, it went into bonds, it went into real estate, and it went into derivatives.
Right.
Where it has not fully gone is out into the general public. This trade war would push that over, but I want everybody out there to think about how much it costs them for a loaf of bread, or what they normally buy, whatever it is that they normally buy. How much did that cost you in 2007? And how much does that cost you today?
That's right. Well, and you and I have talked about this before, too, because you're absolutely right about the stock market. I mean, my God, Amazon.com is now at $1,794 a share. Lynette, when you and I started talking and lamenting this hyperinflation we're seeing in the stock market, Amazon was at $1,000. The next time we talked, it was at $1,200. Now it's at $1,800 a share. You're absolutely right. That is hyperinflation.
Absolutely. And I want you to think about, since you brought up Amazon specifically, or I might have brought it up, I don't know, I get caught up in these conversations with you. I love our conversations. They're so fun.
Thanks.
But, you know, with Amazon, when they came out, their whole model was they don't have to make money. And they also didn't charge sales tax. So it decimated the mom and pop shops, decimated them. Either forced them to work for Amazon and fulfill, so Amazon got a piece of it. So, you know, they call it the Amazon effect, where they go in and they create deflation. Well, there's only one way to fight deflation, whether it's in the stock market or anywhere else, and that's with inflation. So once they get firmly entrenched, so now they're going to start charging sales tax. And oh, by the way, gee, if they have to do that, that's going to hurt all these mom and pops that are forced to work for Amazon and make less money. So, you know, I kind of have an issue around Amazon, and no, I don't own Amazon Prime, and no, I don't really care to.
Well, and let me just say something, because this truly is stunning. I have not looked at these stock prices probably since the last time you and I talked. I'm actually quite shocked here. Folks, you have to realize what the GDP is of most. We should probably you should do a report on this. Next time you're on, let's talk about the GDP of France, of Italy, of Spain. Right now, Amazon has a market cap of $864 billion, and I just checked Apple. It's sitting just a mere $50 billion away from $1 trillion market cap. It's sitting at $950 billion of market cap. This is pure insanity. I don't care how you slice it. This is absolutely where the hyperinflation is hiding.
100%. And so, you know, and that's what people don't see. And look at prices of houses. I mean, you're looking at the highest profitability of private corporations. I mean, I just used that graph, and actually, Megan, that would be a graph that I'll give you that link. So you can look at the corporations at the highest level of profitability because of all of that inflation. And with these stress tests that the bank just went through, and there were 6 banks out of 35, 6 banks out of 35 that were failing these very simple stress tests, because the stress test is not really about gauging the strength of the bank. It's about generating public confidence in the banking sector so they leave their wealth in those markets. And 6 of them were failing. So the Fed, because now, of course, we've got a new regime and they're going through deregulation, so that boosts the bank, already at the highest levels of profitability, already with all of the tax advantages from the new tax laws that came in. Okay, I mean, you've got to start looking at this, and because the Fed let those 6 banks, 5 of them ended up passing, but let those 6 banks know what they had to do, which wasn't change any behavior or even install any more security for the public or for their portfolios. It was about not growing their pay out. Notice that word, out, to their shareholders, which are not you and I, generally speaking, or primarily. They're the insiders, right? So bonuses, increased salaries, dividends, stock buybacks, all of these things that help the 1%. So once they got that go ahead, all clear. 34 out of the 35 banks passed. Now the payouts are huge. So what you're looking at is profits at the highest level that they've been in these corporations, thanks to all of this hyperinflation that the central banks developed. Now, all of these profits, most of them are going to flow out of the banking system because they're going to be paid out, right, to shareholders, to the 1%ers, those guys at the top of the heap. Now we go into the next financial crisis. That money's not in the banking system to to utilize during the crisis, it's gone. But your wealth is there. Bail in, baby. Mark my words. But it won't be enough. So bail out. Thank you, taxpayers. Do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, it's a repeat of '08 and TARP, but worse. It's going to be TARP on steroids to the nth degree. So,
right.
yeah, no,
there's your visible hyperinflation.
Well, let me ask you this, because, obviously our friends over at SD Bullion are in the business of selling physical silver and gold. You guys do the same thing. It's become such a passé topic. Like, here's the thing. You take a look at the market cap of Apple, and you take a look at the market cap of Amazon, and I suppose throw Google and Netflix in the mix. You take those 4, maybe 5 stocks out of these indexes, and these indexes have probably underperformed for the past 5 years.
Right.
Meanwhile, silver stays capped at around $17 an ounce when you know that it costs at least between 10 and 20 for the miners to pull it out of the ground and refine it and then turn it into a beautiful coin that you can buy. I mean, it's just stunning to me that this is passé now to people, that physical gold and physical silver are barbarous relics. Meanwhile, if people are listening to what you're saying, they ought to be a little bit nervous about what the future holds. And maybe owning a little physical silver and gold makes a bit of sense.
Okay, let's look at that a little bit more, okay? Because what you said there is 100% accurate, but let me add to it. Because stocks, bonds, derivatives of which you do not possess, you don't hold them in your hand, are actually utilized by the banks. It's called hypothecation. They use your equity. And banks also, because of the sweep program, they use your deposits as collateral of which they can then borrow many, many times. It's all that leverage, and then go out and make all of these bets. But all of those things are only used in one place, the financial system. Physical silver, physical gold is used in the financial system because those are actually money. Not that a government says they're money, but that the whole world has said that they're money for thousands of years.
Well, that's right. Well, that's right. And get to number 2 in a second, but let's just rewind and let's remind people too that in terms of the banks and the legalese, it's even worse than what you've just shared, because if you have cash in a savings account, you're a creditor. That money that you think is yours, it's in your name. It's the bank's money according to their own legalese. And in the event of a bank run or a total collapse, you'll stand in line as a creditor. And most people do not understand that fact.
Well, I just did that one, I think I did it last Thursday. So by the time everybody's watching it, whatever date last Thursday was. So to show you, and what you're actually referring to is the sweep accounts that were legalized in '97 when growing debt was no longer stimulating to the economy. Because let's face it, when you have debt, you have interest on that debt. At some point, when the interest grows large enough, most of your income is going to service that debt. That's the monetary velocity. That's why we see that going down. So in '97, because it wasn't just growing debt that was going to be beneficial to the banks, now they wanted to add on leverage. And so when you make a deposit, it's the sweep laws. You can Google it if you want, or we can send you a link to it, that were enabled the banks to sweep any deposits into those sub-accounts, and so they're not yours anymore. So you're right. It's the perception that that's your money.
Right.
But we can look at Cyprus, we can look at Greece, we can look at Ireland, we can look in England, we can look in Austria, we can look in Poland, we can look in Russia, we can look at a lot of different places during the crisis when you had no access to your accounts. You may still have had a statement that said you have XYZ, but you couldn't touch it, or you could only touch a minimum amount of it.
That's right. Well, and don't forget Venezuela. And the point I want to make to people, the people at home that are going, oh, wait a minute, this is a bunch of garbage, because I know that my account is insured by the FDIC up to $200,000, as I've covered in detail ad nauseum with both Bixweir and Harley Schlanger and yourself, Lynette. The FDIC has, I think, less than 5% of the money necessary to cover all deposits. It's probably closer to 1%.
They have, I'm going to do something, another one on it soon, but I believe, they don't even have 1%. They had, last time I checked, I believe it was 2 cents, or 1.18, something like that, for every dollar of insured deposits. But what you also need to understand is that the comptroller of the currency is also the chairman of the FDIC. And even though that is a government agency, so therefore, as a government agency, it is supposed to represent us and look out for our best interest, they have stated quite clearly, I believe his name is James Otley, who's the new head of the OCC, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and therefore the FDIC, has said that the banks are his customers. So they have to do deregulation to support the banks. We're not that important.
Right. No,
Okay?
that's right.
I mean, and the FDIC, I mean, if you look at a lot of their documentation around derivatives and where derivatives fall inside of a bankruptcy, they go to the front of the line. And the FDIC has stated, I can send you, and anybody that wants any of these links for you to do your own due diligence, you don't have to take my word for anything. My nickname is Data Gal. I'll send you the links. Any of them that you want, any of the viewers want. But, they've stated that this is great because in a bankruptcy, when they changed the bankruptcy laws in 2005, they put those derivative bets ahead of every other creditor, period, end of discussion. And the FDIC has said, yeah, we'll honor that. That's great. Yep. No problem.
Yep.
So,
everything for the banks, nothing for humanity. That's been the playbook for more than 100 years. And that's why they gave us the Federal Reserve. And that's why they want to go to war with Iran. And they want to go to war with Syria. I mean, what are the 3 countries left without a central bank, Lynette? Let's review. Iran, Syria, and what was the other one? It was Libya. But of course, they toppled Gaddafi, and now they have a central bank, a Rothschild central bank. So we know what the playbook is. And we know what it's going to take to throw off the chains of these bankers. Number 1, get rid of these central banks, get rid of the Federal Reserve. And number 2, jail the bankers. Now, wouldn't that be a boon for humanity? We hear about the Great Jubilee. Wouldn't it be great to have a Jubilee for humanity by simply jailing the bankers and getting rid of the central banks?
That's what Iceland did. Well, They didn't get rid of their central bank, but they did jail the bankers.
Yeah.
But, even though that's what we would like to see and we should see, remember that these guys and the banks are not doing anything illegal, immoral, unethical, disgusting, evil, absolutely.
Well, constitutionally, though, we could make the argument that the founders said our money had to be, the proper weights and measures of our money was gold and silver in physical form. It's the bankers that usurped that. And that goes all the way back to the House of Rothschild realizing that they could store the gold for 10 people, give the people paper receipts, and only one person would ever come back and check on their gold or take delivery of their gold, so they could trade out multiples on the gold with paper. And that's the
fractional reserve
child
banking
of all of this nightmare under which we now toil.
So I think that probably what is a more effective method, honestly, because I don't know at this juncture, I mean, I hope this changes, but at this juncture, I don't think there's enough of us that understand what's happening in order to have a movement that could overthrow the central banks. But if we keep in mind that we vote with our purses, one thing, and India is voting. And so I've got to look into this a little bit more deeply. But remember, they banned cash in November of 2016. They demonetized something like 85% of the cash out there because India has been through a currency devaluation. They've lived through this. So, they hold their wealth in gold on their physical person mostly, but they really were pushing to decash the system. And yet, and again, I have to look more deeply into this, but a recent glance as I was doing a little bit of research says that 90% of the transactions in India are still done with cash. So part of what we have to look at is they definitely need to take us cashless in order to take us to that next level where they have no restrictions. And these are their words, not mine. They say it in like every speech almost, that once they get rid of cash, then there will be no limitations on their ability to attack principal.
Right.
I mean, they've already taken away our purchasing power. That's what inflation is about. We've already lost over 96% of the value out of the original dollar. So what do they have left now? They've got all the value. Now they have to go for the principal because we still think, oh, I got a $20 bill. And, oh, I had a $20 bill 20 years ago. But what that $20 bill would buy you 20 years ago and what it buys you today, the value of it is vastly different. And that's called nominal confusion, and they totally knew that.
Yeah, no, that's such an excellent point. And they will have unlimited power if they can take us cashless. And of course, then they'll want to sell the chip to everybody. And that gets us into the whole mark of the beast system, which Aaron Russo talked about before he died. He said that's what the Rockefellers want to do. That's part of this globalist plan. And more people are waking up. And I'm so thrilled to see this Great Awakening movement and the Walk Away movement. Lynette, why don't you shout out the website and give us a final word?
Okay, so our website is itmtrading.com, but on YouTube we've got a fantastic channel where 3 times a week, I'm presenting something at least 3 times a week. So it's always new information. And what makes us different than any other gold and silver company, although everything we do is physical, is that we all execute a strategy that's based upon repeatable patterns. So what we love to do is develop an individual strategy for each client. So whether you come in with $500 or $5 million, I mean, obviously if you're coming in with $500, you're going to have to build your strategy over time, but you know what you need. And then you get a book. So you know where to use it, how to use it, when to use it, what to look for, all of those patterns, because we find that what people really want is to understand what's happening and know what they should do about it to protect themselves and their family. And that's what we and our team is all about.
All right. Very good. And guys, for those of you who still think nothing has changed and nothing's getting better, sure, we've covered some bad news in this conversation. It's stuff you need to be aware of so that you can protect yourself, take steps, take measures to put in place the safety net required to survive whatever is coming. And for those of you who think that it's not getting better and nothing will ever change, I just want to remind you of how far we've come. Oh, yeah. Listen to this from George H.W. Bush. When I was a kid, nobody really knew what the heck he was talking about. Well, we all know now.
Out of these troubled times, our 5th objective, a new world order, can emerge. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Yeah.
All right, Lynette. Well, thanks again for your time. It's always a thrill speaking with you. And take care of yourself, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, you too.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. God bless. And guys, we appreciate your support. Check us out for real news 24/7 at SGTreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless. Bye-bye.
Regarding the 2016 election and Trump, Brennan then sent teams over to work with the British. He and Clapper went to Comey, who's turning out to be a hapless half-wit. They went to Comey and said, you have to set up an investigation into this.